Wallace, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hey, Wallace!
Good to be here tonight. Always good to be in a meeting and be with my people. And AA people have been my family for many years. And especially recently. I've been in more meetings in the last 3 weeks than I'm usually in. But it's mighty lonely around the home now. And I hope that I'll be able to get through this talk tonight. I know the big book tells me precisely what I'm supposed to do. It says our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we're like now. I've heard an awful lot of people get behind the podium and share things from the podium that should be shared one-on-one with the sponsor. I don't intend to take step 5 up here tonight. But I'm going to tell you in a general way what it used to be like and what happened to me, and through God's grace and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, what I'm like today. My sobriety date is February 16th, 1964. And a lot of you were not born back then. Good looking crowd. Anywhere I go, it's a good looking crowd. Everybody seems to be a little bit younger. I can't help it. I've been around for 88 years last August 4th. And it's only through God's grace and the program of AA could that be possible. I know that in 1962, if I hadn't got in trouble, I would have died in the community within a year of this. I know that beyond a shadow of a doubt. I'm a low-bottom drunk. Can't help it, except I can stay sober today because I got a way and means of doing it. The solution to my problem is the process of recovery that's outlined in the big book, starting with step 1 and going from there. And I truly believe that any person that comes into AA and will make that unconditional surrender, become willing to clean house and trust God and work with others, I believe you got a very good chance of becoming an old-timer like me. You might be better looking, but you can live long enough, work the program, and don't die, and don't drink, and you might become an old-timer in AA. I didn't set out to be this old in AA. I wanted a solution to my problem right where I was. And some of you have heard me before, and you know that I was in prison when I got in AA. And I'm grateful to God that they're opening the doors again next week. And those of us who work in the institutions will be going back in next Wednesday night. And I've got my medical papers to prove I've had the shots. So I'm ready. But it is good to be here. And I've known since I was, looking back, I've known since I was an alcoholic from the time I started drinking about 20 years old. I know that I'm born and raised in Roxboro, North Carolina, into a family 6 boys and 6 girls. Mom and Dad found out what was causing it and they quit. But I'm the baby boy. Now, I have one sister remaining. She lives in Clovis, South Carolina. My parents have been dead since 70 and 71, and other brothers and sisters have fallen by the wayside since. And I'm the only boy remaining. And I'm very short on nieces and nephews too. They don't communicate much, but it's their problem, not mine. I know that I'm an alcoholic, and I've heard alcoholism described in a couple of different ways. In the big books it says that we are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. And I've heard another definition that anytime drinking interferes with your social life, working life, or family life, in all probability you're an alcoholic. Either one of those reasons fit me to a T, because I not only had problems in my working, social, family life, had problems in the Army life, had problems in civilian life, and had problems in prison life. Because in prison, when I was locked up, I was getting locked up because of violating rules. And had gotten involved in some other little activities, like, I don't know what you call it, stuff made out of banana peeling, potatoes, rotten grapes and so forth, but it'll do the job if you can hold your nose long enough to get it down. And also some officials were smuggling in things that would help you sleep real well. And I got accustomed to taking a few of those. I know on one occasion a guy was going to give me a real deal on some pills. And I was new. I wasn't familiar with them. And he says, I'm going to give you a real deal today. It'll be a moving experience for you. You take these 40, it'll cost you $1. And I wanted that moving experience. And I took those pills, and about an hour later, I started moving. This bathroom over here, that bathroom over there, anywhere I could find a hole, I went. It was a moving experience. I didn't enjoy it either. I didn't go back to him either. I know that I've been an alcoholic for years. I didn't start drinking, sipping a little beer when I was 17. Had my own automobile, and the older guys would run with me, and they'd ride around, and I'd put the gas in, and they drank the beer, and after a while they enticed me to start drinking a little beer with them. Well, I didn't like the taste of it. I knew why Budweiser had all those horses around. I just didn't like it. It didn't taste good to me. It made me agitated. It wasn't good. Later on, I learned to love it like a whole row slop. But 2 years, those guys and I messed around together with, and I poured out a lot of good beer. They would not see me at the ball games or racing or down at the lake. And when they weren't looking, I'd pour my beer out on the ground. I didn't want to drink it, but I didn't want them to know I was drinking so little. Anyway, that went on until 1953. I was 19 years old. The Korean War was in progress, and I was drafted. Went to Fort Jackson for basic training, and from there, in October of that year, I was transferred to Fort Lee, Virginia. And in November of '53, I went home on a weekend pass. And that night, I'm out in the yard, and a couple of friends saw me out, and they stopped by and asked me, did I want to go to the dance? And I said, yeah. I had been to that dance before, but I had never gotten up and dance. I had never felt like dancing. Anyway, I went to that dance that night with those guys, and I had the Army OD uniform on. I had little pins up on the shoulders to make it look a little bit dressy. Had all those medals on over here I'd earned that afternoon at the PX. And I'm standing at the heater, and I'm minding my own business. My flat top haircut about like it is tonight, except it was a different color and a lot thicker. And I was real neat. I had always believed in being real neat. And I had the Army OD uniform on, it fit tight. And those medals were standing out, boy. And a lady came to the window and bought a ticket, and then she came around to the door and started walking across that room directly toward that heater where I was. And she was well endowed, and everything was just moving in unison. She's coming toward me. She had zeroed in, and she started talking to me. And I'm embarrassed. My preacher brother had told me that if I ever drank and ever got involved with another girl, I'd go to hell. And I never had like too much fire, and I didn't want to go to hell. And I was a little bit embarrassed. But people were looking that way and whispering to each other and grinning and talking. I didn't know what all the commotion was about. But I finally figured out, because I'd heard some stories about her when I'd be in the pool rooms and service stations that would curl your hair. And she's talking to me, and I immediately associated her with what my brother had said, a naughty girl. And she asked me in a little bit, would I escort her out in her car? And I thought maybe some wolves in the parking lot. I'd do my patriotic duty and escort her out. And we went out there and got in an old Chevrolet in a well-lit parking lot. She started the motor up on that Chevrolet, started the radio up on country and western music, reached over under my knees to where that heater button was, and she turned that heater on. And when she come back up in the seat, she threw her arm around me and started whispering some things to me and kissing me on the cheek and neck. And I fantasized about things like this, but it had never happened. My experience with women up to that night was about like my being in the Army. I'd fired off a few good rounds, but I'd never been in combat. Anyway, we sat in that car about 30 minutes, and she saw she won't make much progress for me. She reached upon the seat and got that pint of white moonshine liquor, pulled it out and got 2 cups and poured out 2 cups. And she's holding that whiskey there up against me, and I'm looking at her and looking at that whiskey, thinking about what Mom and Dad had told me, my preacher brother. And then I'm thinking about what I'd heard about them, and I'm thinking about the possibilities of the evening. And I look at her again, she's beautiful, and they were too. And I made the decision, when she stuck that whiskey out, I turned it up, held my nose, and I got it down. And we sat down and had a couple more cups of that whiskey, and then she decided we better go in and dance. We went in that dance, and that fiddle, guitar, and banjo started up, and they dose-a-doed around that room. They'd all joined hands, and they just running around that room. And she pulled me out on that floor, and we circled that room about twice, and I could dose-a-do, promenade, lemonade, whatever they was doing, I could do it. We got real agitated when the bouncers came up. They started doing the bunny hop, and I got real good at that real quick. And they didn't like my extra efforts in it, and they asked us to leave. And I can't tell you the rest of the story tonight, but I can tell you this. About 2:30 in the morning, I'm back home in bed upstairs, bed I slept in for years before I went in the Army. And I'm laying in that bed and I'm fighting off sleep. I don't ever want to sleep again. I just want to relive Saturday night over and over again. I had enjoyed that honky-tonk city, everything that had happened. And I made up my mind, this has been the solution to my problem. I need that booze in me. It enables me to laugh, talk, dance, socialize, and act like other people. I had had a ball with them that night. I was not embarrassed, and I just had a delightful time. And I made up my mind that Sunday morning that next week I'll be buying my first pint of whiskey when I come home, and I did that. And at Fort Lee, Virginia, some guys had invited me to go with them up to Richmond. We went up to Richmond, and I found out up there after a few trips that if I put this booze in me on Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, it didn't matter what night it was, it would have the same effect that it did on Saturday night and Friday nights when I was back home. And I began doing that. It became a real habit, quickly became a habit. And over a period of time, it wasn't long before I was losing control as to when I could stop. And I didn't understand that because the guys that I run with would not drink on the way back to Fort Lee 12 or 1 o'clock in the morning. I did. If booze was in the car, beer, whiskey, or any kind, I would drink it. And I got to the place in the end of my drinking, I'd only drank two kinds. That was mine and yours. That's all I'd fool with. And I got married after I got out of the Army. I got out of the Army in '55, in May, and a year later, in October of '56, I'm on the verge of going back into the Army. I'm having some problems around home. I've gotten caught for drunken driving. And they took my license. I had already enrolled in high school to finish my high school education, to get a GED. And when I lost my license, I had to quit school again. Well, in October '56, this is when it was. I didn't really want to go back in the Army because I was patriotic. I wanted to go back in because of the trouble I was running from. Driving under the influence after license revoked, resisting arrest, striking police officer, all this good fun stuff. And my girlfriend, she told me that we should get married. I said, I'm in no condition to get married. She said, the condition I'm in, we better get married. So we got married. 9 days later, I'm back on active duty, Fort Lee, Virginia. 3 months later, I'm on a ship en route to Korea. The Korean War had long been over. It had been over in August of '53. While I was in basic training, they must have known I was coming. But I was on that ship en route to Yokohama, Japan, and from there to Korea. And I'm standing at the rail of that ship one morning. I'm watching whales out in the distance come up and splash the water and shoot the water up. I'd never seen whales before. But I saw them that day, and I wasn't having DTs either. But I stood at that rail, and I got to thinking about the guy down below me was vomiting over. And I watched him, and I said, that's the way I do a lot. I made up my mind. I was looking back at all the trouble I'd been in, driving under the influence, after license revoked, resisting arrest, public drunkenness, drunken so-and-so. And I said, every time I start drinking, I lose control, I get in trouble. I'm not going to drink it for real. I had been in the National Guard when I got out in '55, and I had been promoted from PFC to corporal. And I was going back in the Army with that rank. And I made up my mind when I got to Korea, I would not drink. 5.5 months after I was in Korea with those corporal stripes, I had not drank any booze. I had not gone into any of the clubs. I had really worked. I had soldiered. I had been Soldier of the Month 5 consecutive times and Battalion Soldier of the Month 3 times. And he come to command, I put my name before the promotion board, and I was promoted to sergeant. Well, that same evening, it was a Saturday evening, that the 3 sergeants in the company saw me coming down from the shower on the hill there, and they told me to join them down at the NCO club. And I had never been in that club. And they said, it's your responsibility to buy us some drinks to celebrate this rank. I said, okay, I'll do it. Well, I went down to the club about an hour later, and I got in there, and the guys were already sitting there with the girlfriends, and they was drinking those mixed drinks, and sipping that beer, putting the quarters in the jukebox and holding those girls close. And I got to thinking, I've been over here all this time now, and I ain't had a drink, I ain't had nothing. And I sat there a little bit and looking at them sergeant stripes and so proud of them, and got to thinking about how good I had been doing and how I had so much respect from everybody, the Koreans who worked on my supervision. And I made up my mind, I'm going to drink a beer with these guys and socialize. And I drank a beer with them and waited a little bit and nothing happened. So I ordered another beer and got it down pretty good too. And still nothing happened. So I was doing so well with that, I said, well, a double shot old Granddad and Coke will be just fine. To make a long story short, they threw me out through the screen door. I was drunk and disorderly in about 2 hours. And I don't recall it back to the barracks that night. I do know that on the next morning, Sunday morning, in my NCO room, I reached on the dresser and I got the fifth and I started drinking. And it wasn't long before, on Monday morning, I drove to work. I reached over on the dresser and I get the fifth and I started drinking. And it wasn't long before the company commander was talking with me very sternly, wondering what in the world was going on with me since my abrupt change of personality and actions and quality of my work. And he didn't like it. And after a while, I was court-martialed. Went back down to corporal. Made it back to the States in '58 with the rank of corporal. Went to Fort Lee, Virginia. And I brought my alcoholism with me from the States to Korea and from Korea back to Fort Lee. And it wasn't long before the company commander was cheering me out. The mess sergeant was fussing with me because I'd go in the mess hall in the morning and I'd vomit just a little puddle. And those guys were sisters, they couldn't stand it. They were not like the brave men and women that served in Afghanistan. They couldn't stand just a little puddle of puke. And they got upset. And then the company commander, when I got caught in Richmond, Virginia for drunken driving and hit and run, the company commander really got upset. He had already sent me to a chaplain for counseling. He had already sent me to a psychiatrist for counseling. And neither one of those things did any good to me. And finally, after those 6 charges in Colonial Heights that I got, in addition to the charges in Richmond, they consolidated all those and I was to be sentenced on those. And the company commander told us, prosecuting attorney, to let him take action first. He took my record, put it before the promotion board, the officers, to determine what to do with me. And every one of those 12 officers declared that I had become alcoholically unfit for military service. I was no longer the top soldier of the month. The guy that was battalion soldier of the month, company soldier. I didn't look like that at all. If I walked through the day room where the other guys were shooting pool, reading the newspapers, or writing letters, I had to look down at the floor. I couldn't look up at them. I was so ashamed of my actions and the way I was living, and I didn't know what to do about it. I didn't look at all like what I used to look like. And when they discharged me from the Army one day, I went to court the next day, and that man was absolutely right. They did put me in jail. I got a 90-day jail sentence and a $575 fine and cost. And I pulled that time in jail in 57 days because I worked as a trustee. I was cleaning the judge's chamber, shoveling the snow, frying herrings for breakfast. And you know, that's a real treat, smelling those fish in the morning. Anyway, I got out after 57 days. Wife number one had already started filing for divorce when she found out that the check would not be coming from the Army every month. And I had a girlfriend. I mean, she was only 19 or 20 years older than I. And she was up there at the jail that morning and I was getting out. And she had that old dilapidated Pontiac in the jail yard there. All of her grandkids was in the back seat. And when she saw me coming out of the jail that morning, she said, I'll never go to another I told her I'd never go to another zoo as long as I live. And she said, let's drink to it. She reached in that trunk and got that pint and handed it to me. I broke the seal on it, took a big swig. And then she spit her snuff out and she took a swig. And we really had an enjoyable affair going on now for the next year. She'd call the law on me and throw the butcher knife out in the bushes. And sometimes I'd call the law on her and throw the butcher knife out in the bushes. And sometimes the neighbors called law on both of us. We had it going on in that block. And finally, Mom and Dad found out where I was and wanted me to come home, and I went home. I hitchhiked from Fort Lee, Virginia back to Roxborough. I remember I went into the dirty clothes hamper, got my cleanest dirty clothes I had and put them on and hit the highway. And when I got to the house, Mom and Dad said, you stay here, get your life straightened out, but no drinking. And I promised them that it would be that way. And again, here I had 5.5 months or so of dryness. I didn't go running around with anybody. I went with them to church. They introduced me to a Baptist Sunday school teacher, and she was going to be my salvation, Mom and Dad thought. And she was for about 5.5 months. And she asked me to marry her. And she was 8 years older than I, but she didn't look all that bad. She had a nice house, a good car, a good job. She was well respected. So we got married. 3 weeks later, we went to a dance. Now, Baptists around home don't dance. They won't even have sex standing up there. Think somebody will think they're dancing. But she loved to dance. She loved to dance. And I got up and tried to dance with her. I had 9 left feet. When she wanted to doze, I wanted to doze. When she wanted to promenade, I'd do something else. I couldn't do it. And she went to the restroom with a friend. And that lady's husband worked in the mill with me. And while they were gone, he slid a glass of old Granddad across the table to me. And I gulped it down about 3 swallows. When she got back, I was ready to dance. But when the dance was over, they had to wake me up at the back of the room. I had passed out at a table. And that was the way my life went with her for the next year. Drinking on weekends, getting in trouble, running around, losing jobs, getting hired, getting fired over and over again. And I know that with the way that I had boils coming on my arms and legs from drinking, my blood was all out of whack. The doctor says if you don't stop drinking for a while, you're going to die. And I knew he was right. And I did stop for a couple of weeks to help my medical condition a little bit. Then I went right back to drinking again. But in January of '63, I started drinking on a Friday afternoon at 2 o'clock, and I don't recall getting home Friday night, Saturday night, or Sunday night. And on a Monday morning, my wife was shaking, wife number 2 now. Wife number 2 was shaking me real hard, asking me was I going to work, and I said yes. When I attempted to get off the bed that morning to go into the restroom that was on this side, my elbow, when I swung around to the right, hit something on the pillow, and there was 2 pints of white moonshine whiskey that I apparently put on that pillow on Sunday night. Well, I sat there on the side of that bed and was drinking that white whiskey and smoking a cigarette when my wife came back in to see why I wasn't in the kitchen for breakfast. When she saw what I was doing, she walked up in front of me, and I can assure you she did not sound like a Baptist Sunday school teacher. She sounded strictly from the pool room. Now, she told me I was a sorry, no good, low-down drunk. This was all I'd ever be. No good to her or to anyone else. And she said, when I get home from work this afternoon, I want you and your mess out of this house forever, and don't ever come back. And she went on to work that morning, and I don't recall leaving the home that morning. I do remember that sometime later, I'm in the courtroom. I'm in Roxborough, North Carolina, and I've been charged with some serious offenses. The judge that was trying that case told the sheriff, you present the evidence and then we'll see what we've got. And the sheriff said that when he was testifying that he had looked out his window that afternoon at 4 o'clock, very, very cold November night. He looked out the window, saw me on the street drunk, and he was going to come out and arrest me. And he came out. He didn't come out then and arrest me. I wish 1,000 times that he had. He said the phone rang across the room. His secretary was not working. And he went over and answered the phone, and when he came back to the window, he didn't see me and he forgot about it. And I wished 1,000,000 times that he had. Offenses were committed within the next 2 hours that brought about my arrest, and no bond was allowed. And on February the 11th of 1963, I stood in that courtroom as that judge sentenced me to a period of 40 years and then a natural life at the expiration of the 40. Just take them out of the sheriff. And they took me to Central Prison, where I was handcuffed and shackled between 2 other guys. And in the back hall of Central Prison, when I heard that door on my right-hand side slam shut, that was the most gosh-awful, forlorn sound I'd ever heard in all my life. But it was I should have been frightened. I'd never been in prison before. I pulled that time in jail and had been in other jails many times overnight. But I should have been frightened, but I wasn't. I was relieved. I knew I would not have to face up to those people at home ever again. They would not get in to me, and I would not get out to them. And I knew I would be all right. Within 3 weeks' time, the guys that I was working with in the classification section, the guys took me into their confidence and told me how these outside issues was being smuggled into Central Prison. Some of the guards was bringing them in. Some of the free people who worked in the shops were bringing them in. And I began taking that stuff if I had the money. And I was beginning to get locked up while I was locked up. I got fired from that job in June of '63. Fired, sent to work being in the print shop, learning to be an offset press operator. Also, a couple of other things happened in June I'll never forget. Is one that when wife number 2 went home from work on a Monday morning, she smelled cigarette smoke. And she walked into the bedroom, and it was a man there waiting on her. She was assaulted and kidnapped and robbed. Also in June of '63, a guy that became a friend of mine invited me to go with him to a meeting. And I never heard of an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. And I went with him to that meeting. And I sat down at the back of the room, and I noticed that the free people over a period of time would come in and they would hug the inmates and they'd say, I love you, I appreciate you, and so forth. And those guys would share their experience, strength, and hope, and I'd listen. I knew when they were talking about I love you and hugging those guys, love was already there. It was 2 guys on the back row holding hands every week. And I didn't want no part of it. Anyway, that was around June of '63. Well, I went to that meeting, and in February of '64, I'm in the prison library writing a letter to my mother. She's in the 70s. A so-called friend come in and put something on table in front of me, and I immediately threw it down and chased it. In about 20 minutes' time, I was no longer interested in that letter to my mother. I tore it to shreds, threw it in the trash can, and I went out to the chapel, to the last window on the left-hand side. And I dug down in the ground to where I had my plastic dollars hid. And I went to my bootlegger then and got some things, and went back to my cell block on the 4th floor up. In that cell block that night, I came to sometime after 8 o'clock. The count was over with. And I'm sitting on the side of that bed thinking about here I am in Central Prison in this 40-plus life. I can't get drunk, stay drunk as long as I want to stay drunk. I can't get sober because I'm not in the program. Suicide was the only thing that made sense to me, and I had been entertaining that idea for several weeks. I took everything that I had and drank that last bottle of alcohol, and I knew that door would slide open at 9 o'clock that night. I was standing at that door, crying, praying, determined to plunge over 40 feet below to the concrete floor and end my wretched existence. And I was determined to go over, and you can call it sickness, blacking out, passing out, anything you want to call it. It don't matter to me what you call it. But what I choose to believe is that a loving God, His infinite mercy, gave His sick, hopeless, helpless alcoholic one last reprieve. I came to. Sometime later, I'm on my knees in front of that commode. My head is in it, and I'm vomiting and crying and praying, and I pass out again. Later on, I come to again, and I crawl into the bed. When I went out of the cell block the next morning, about 6 or 6:30, when the guards were coming around to wake us up to go to breakfast and to our respective jobs, the inmates on my right-hand cell and left-hand cell confronted me. Wallace, what was going on in there last night? I said, what are you talking about? They said, last night, I had been in that cell block alone that night. The other guy that slept in there was in the hospital. He was sick. They asked me what was going on. And I said, what are you talking about? They said, last night, you cried out loud enough for everybody on this road to hear you. God, if you help me get back to AA, I'll try. And I definitely made it back to AA the next night for the meeting. About 2 weeks later, I had been taking pamphlets from that AA meeting back to my cell block, reading them. I wasn't going down to see the football games on television or any other shows. I was reading those pamphlets, and about 2 weeks later, some of you guys and gals in here know Tom Ivers. He's an alcoholic at rehabilitation officer that had 7 years of sobriety at that time. He had pulled 3 years in Michigan State prison where he had gotten a 2-year degree from Michigan State University while he was cutting hair and boxing. And you notice he got big ears. I think that's how he got the boxing. He got his big ears from the boxing. They're beating his ears off. But anyway, he's one of the finest people I've ever met. He's in Elm Crawford. We're on the land with Alzheimer's disease. I'm still going to see him. And some people say, why do you go see him now? I said, because I love him. Why do I go see him? He might not know it, but I know it. He's been my friend and my employer. I worked for him for years in Central Prison. And after the riot came about in 1968, 7 people were killed and over 100 injured. I was severely injured, and I had no more to do with that riot than you did. But I was almost killed in that riot. And I believe that's the reason this cancer situation is here now. I'm to have it worked on the 25th of this month. But Tom saved my life. He gave me a copy of the big book and told me what I needed to do with it. And I began typing letters. The prison group roster over 100 members, and writing letters for him. And I became secretary of the group, chairman of the group, and had several other jobs in the group. I became a staff artist for the prison publication, and later on became the editor of it for 5 years. And that was a 32-page magazine that was published quarterly, and by Central Prison inmates, and I was the editor of that for years. Anyway, Tom, after that riot, that broke up the age groups, broke up chapel meetings and everything. And after the riot, I was transferred to work then for the doctor of the hospital. He was in charge of the hospital. And one day, working in that doctor's office, they came over to the back hall in November of 68. They came over to the hospital and got me, carried me up to the back hall. And I didn't know why they were taking me up there. And I was in A grade. I had not been promoted to honor grade. And V. Lee Bounds, who was the director of prisons, saying that Wallace will be transferred immediately over to the Correctional Center for Alcoholics, where he will work with Tom Iverson on the alcoholism treatment program. And that was unheard of. But it's not a miracle that comes about as a result of what happens when you turn your will and your life over to the care of a loving God. And I worked over there for 2 years with him, and he was transferred to Sanford to be superintendent. 3 weeks later, he transferred me. And to make a long story short, in 1981, Governor Hunt listened to the people who were wanting Wallace to be a citizen of Lee County. Over 500 letters had gone in saying we would love to have him a citizen of Lee County. Governor Hunt commuted that time, 35 years, and I was paroled. Went on work release with the phone company, Hines Telephone Company in Sanford, and retired there after 20 years. And when I retired from the phone company on a Friday, on a Monday I went to work with Tom Iverson down here in the South Central area as an alcoholism counselor in the inmate DART program. And I did that for 3 years before that contract ran out. I've had 2 tickets since I've gotten out of prison in 1981. One for 38 miles an hour in a 25 mile an hour school zone, and another one for 69 miles an hour in a 55 mile zone. That's the extent of the trouble I've been in with the law, and I'm grateful for that. I've known for years and years that when I trust God, clean house, and keep my life straight, I get along just fine. Recently my wife died, and it don't matter what happens in life, as long as we stick with the program and believe in our higher power and know that the help is going to come. It will come. It will come. I can assure you of that. I got to quit. I'm not finished, but I'm going to quit. I do hope that if there's anyone here tonight that's considering going back out, that you'll reconsider. It'll just get worse. I've seen many people down through the years go back out, and it always gets worse. And they know when they come back that they'll be welcome. And that's true. They will be welcome. But I believe in this. Stay while you're here. it's no guarantee you'll get back if you go out and start doing it again. It always gets worse. And I know today that as long as I keep on trusting God, cleaning house, sticking with you people, leaning on the higher power for help, I'll get along just fine, regardless of what comes my way. I'm not looking for another wife. Three's enough. Three's enough. I'm cleaning house, cooking, and cleaning the yard, and doing just fine. And I'm going to hang in there as long as I can, one day at a time, because I know my higher power's in charge. Thank you.